What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Overwatch League Season 2 rosters, fan thoughts, and analysis video. Today we will be covering the Houston Outlaws, but before we get into the video, I want to just make a little aside to talk about one thing real quick. This weekend, starting yesterday, was Thanksgiving weekend here in the United States. And as a result of that, I am recording this video early. Usually I would record this video Thursday night and then schedule it to go up Friday. But it's currently Tuesday night that I'm recording this. And the reason is that I'm going to be flying home for Thanksgiving tomorrow. I don't want to record this tomorrow. I want to make sure I have this as well as the video for the Philadelphia Fusion ready before I go home. And then I can edit it together here or even like at home for the Philadelphia Fusion one. So those are going to be recorded earlier than usual. And I say this for one reason, and I don't even know what I'm trying to say. For one main reason, and that is that in the event that between now when I'm recording this video and when you're watching this video on Friday, the Houston Outlaws make a signing, right? I know about it, most likely. I'm just not around recording at the time, so I'll say the same thing at the beginning of the Philadelphia Fusion video for when it goes up on Monday, but I just want everyone to know that that is why, if something happens, that's why it's on this video. I don't expect anything to happen. I don't really think it's very likely something will happen, but just in case something does, I wanted to say right here, right now, that yes, this was recorded early for Thanksgiving, and that's why I might have missed some stuff that goes on. But let's talk about the Houston Outlaws, a team that I actually thought, the last couple of weeks of the season, I thought they had a great chance at making the playoffs. I predicted them to make the playoffs over the Philadelphia Fusion. I was looking at their schedules, both teams kind of comparison, looking at the two schedules, comparing them, and I looked at that matchup between Houston and Philadelphia. I thought that was a really big matchup. And I thought that Houston would end up being the team on top. They lost a couple games that I thought they could have won, and the Philadelphia Fusion won the games that they had to win. And they won, the game against London, which I had given to London in my prediction. So Houston is a team that, they had several, 3-2 matches. They had that 3-2 match at the end of the season against New York Excelsior. You win that game, you're one game behind Philadelphia instead of 2 games behind Philadelphia with the better differential still. Maybe win another 3-2 tight game here and there somewhere else in the season, and you look at yourself in the playoffs. This is a team that was very, very close, and I think it's interesting. You look at these teams, you look at Houston and Seoul. They had the same record. Houston had slightly better differential. If you want to be specific, I'll pull it up here. But those two teams were very close in their ranking. I think Houston was better. I think they showed to be the better team. I think they looked like the better team. And they finished higher, as they think they should have. Their differential was only 4 higher, though. Philadelphia and Seoul had the same differential. Now, differential doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, I think Philadelphia is a better team than Houston, and I think they proved that when they made playoffs. And I think, ironically, I picked Houston to make playoffs. I would have never picked Houston to beat Boston, but I did pick Philadelphia to beat Boston because I think Philadelphia was a better team than Boston. And that's kind of where you look at some of these things, and it gets weird, and you just don't really know how to feel about teams. But this Houston Outlaws team is a team that I think was so close to making it. But at the same time, they were the second to last team in their division, and that shows you how tough the Atlantic Division was. And if this division gets more competitive this season, which it very well might be, we don't know anything about some of these new teams yet, or we know very little about them. We haven't seen Toronto's full roster. We haven't seen anything from Washington other than Giannis. We don't. Paris is Paris, and they'll be an interesting team to watch. Atlanta's got a very interesting team. But none of the teams really stand out to me as a huge contender, other than maybe Washington when we see what they have. I really like Washington's team right now, but Houston's in a really interesting spot because they were on the cusp of making the playoffs. 8 teams are going to make playoffs next season. Did Houston do enough this offseason to get themselves into the playoffs? So I'm going to look at their roster, we're going to see what they did, and we'll talk about it. We'll start with the DPS players, which is where I feel their problem was last season for the most part, and that's really the key to whether or not they can do it again. If they can have that run and they can do well enough to make the season playoffs and not just the stage playoffs like they did in Stage 1. So, we start with Linkser. He is a Finnish player. He is their main hit scan player. He's their Widowmaker, essentially. He'll play some McCree, he'll play some Genji, and Hanzo. He has a hero pool, but he's Widowmaker at the end of the day. That's who he's going to play the most. And I look at Linkser specifically. Linkser was up and down a decent amount last season. He had some games where he was really good, and some games where he really struggled. You really can't be positive with how Linkser is going to play. I think he was good. He was one of the best Widowmaker duelists throughout the season, if not the best. Striker may have had a higher win rate. The only thing with Striker is that Striker only played Widowmaker primarily in Stage 4. He was playing a lot more Tracer in Stage 3 and 1 and 2. So that's really kind of where I'm not positive about the numbers, but Linkser had one of the highest Widowmaker duel numbers late in the season. So he's a good Widowmaker, and he's especially good at stopping other Widowmakers. Now, Widowmaker is not as big in the meta right now as she was in the Overwatch League, just because these GOATs, triple tank, triple support comps are really big right now. So whether or not we see a lot of Linkser is the question, and this brings me to the rest of the DPS players, because while, yes, Linkser is this hit scan player, and that's what he's going to mainly do, they still have other DPS players, and their main one from last season, other than Linkser, was Jake, who is known primarily for his Junkrat play. And the problem with that is Junkrat is not the kind of hero you're going to use in every map. Now, don't take this as me saying Jake can only play Junkrat. He can play a lot of other heroes, right? He can play some Pharah. We saw him play some Torbjorn at one point in time, only for a very short amount of time, but he played some Torbjorn. He can play some different heroes, but one of the biggest issues that this team faced with Jake, and part of why they had to sign other DPS players, is that Jake was never a great Tracer player. And they had other DPS players on this team that they ended up cutting, or that are no longer in the active roster, in Mendo Kusai and Clockwork. Mendo Kusai would have been their Tracer player, but he didn't really play exceptionally. Then they had Clockwork as well, who also didn't play exceptionally. Basically, he wasn't playing well enough to take Jake out and have them come in, because Jake had a more diverse hero pool, and while, yes, he couldn't play that Tracer super well in the early stages, it didn't really matter come Stage 4, right? Where Houston had a pretty good Stage 4. They lost some games that they probably should not have, and had they won some of those games, I think they would have been in playoffs. But they looked pretty good late in the season, and it was telling of what they had done and how the stage was kind of working more towards them. And with some of these Brigitte changes that are coming in, it's going to be interesting to see how the kind of season shapes. Is it going to be still leaning more towards that triple tank, triple support comp, or is it going to start slowly creeping back towards that dive meta where we see a lot more Tracer play? And that's really the question surrounding Jake, is if it becomes more of that Tracer dive comp play, then Jake probably will have to be sidelined more, because he's not as known as a Tracer player. He's a Junkrat player first and foremost. You have two other DPS players on the team, other than Jake and Linkser. You have Arhan. Sorry about that. Arhan was signed in the middle of the season. He was signed, I believe, in February. March, end of March, they signed him. And he played Tracer for them late in the season. He was alright. He was fine. Arhan's an interesting player. He played for the Korean World Cup team in 2016. Did not play for them after that. He wasn't on any World Cup team after that. He got second place in Apex Season 1 with AF Blue. losing 4-0 to Team Envious, which is now, of course, the Dallas Fuel. Got third at Apex Season 3, once again, playing Envious, but this time winning. And then in APAC Premier 2017, they got third, fourth, losing to Afrika Freaks, aka GC Busan. Or he was playing for Afrika Freaks, and lost to GC Busan. So he had some history and some good games and whatnot, but he was an interesting signing. I don't really know how I feel about him. He didn't really impress me when I saw him play, and he didn't replace Jake at all. Because as soon as Tracer became not as played, Jake came right back into the lineup. So you have Arhan. He feels like a weird addition to this team. He's the only South Korean player on this roster, which, unless Arhan has a lot of history playing with English-speaking teams and just Western teams in general and Western players, I feel like that would probably be an issue. But I don't know well enough, because I know Afrika Freaks, AF Blue, those are Korean teams. So I don't know if he has that English speaking history, because he's the only player that Houston Outlaws have had that is South Korean. The only 3 players left the team, or were cut by the team. 2 of them were from the United States, and 1 of them was from Sweden. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing, and I don't know if he's going to get more play than the other signing that this team had, which was actually a trade, which is Dante from the San Francisco Shock. So they traded with the San Francisco Shock. They traded away Smurf from the GG Esports Academy and got Dante. And Dante is going to be, once again, a player who's going to play some Tracer, but he's also known for Sombra and Genji play. He also has a little bit of Junkrat play, plays some Zarya too. I don't expect him to ever play Junkrat or Zarya over some of the other players, but it comes down to, is he going to be their main Tracer player? Or, if they need Sombra, I'm sure Dante will be the one that plays it. Will he play Tracer over Arhan? How will they play? And I think it comes down to really what they need. I expect Jake, Arhan, and Dante to pretty much split time. I wouldn't be surprised. I think eventually, one of them will probably start to get more playtime as the season goes on. One will be more dominant as a player and as someone that they have on stage. But if you have a map where you have you have to make a choice. If you need Jake, say you need Jake for one of the points because you need a really good Junkrat, but then later in the map you don't need a great Junkrat, you need someone else. You need a Tracer, for example, right? What do you prioritize? In that case, maybe you do put in Dante because he has more experience on both Junkrat and Tracer and can play both. But if that one point where you need Junkrat is really important and you want to make sure you win that point every time you do it, do you take the risk? So these are the interesting kind of things to look at with this team, because by no means is Jake bad at other heroes. He's a pro player. He can play some of these heroes at top level, but I might have said players. Some of them may have said bad at other players, bad at other heroes. He can play other heroes, but he's not a Sabi level Tracer, a Striker level Tracer, right? And those are some of the best Tracers in the world, so saying that is, people are going to say, okay, well, yeah, no one's better than them, but you got to kind of understand that they put themselves in a really interesting spot with the roster that they have, and I don't really know what their plan is with that roster in terms of their DPS roster. Like I said, I expect a lot of kind of split time between them. I think getting Dante was a really good move. I think he is the kind of player that brings what they need. He's got that depth, and I think he will be a really great signing. He might be the best signing, or trade in this case, of the Overwatch League offseason. Next, we're going to move on to the main tanks and the flex tanks. We're going to start with the main tank role because it's the quickest one to talk about. They have Muma. He's the only main tank they have. He's the only main tank they need. They did have some other ones. They had Fact Fiction, who they cut and is now with Mayhem Academy. But they don't need anyone other than Muma. Muma, you could argue, is the best Western tank. You have XQC, who's also very good, but Muma is definitely up there, I think, with some of the best Western tanks. He's a very good player. I don't really think there's any concern in that role, so throw Moom out there every game. He's going to be out there as long as they need a main tank, which is every game. So, yeah, Moom is not an issue to me, and I think they have locked up one of the most important roles, if not the most important role, with one of the best players they could have gotten in a Western team. Next, you have your flex tank role, which is a little bit more split, but also not. You have Coolmat and you have Spree. Coolmat is going to be more of the Diva player, while Spree is going to be more of the Zarya player. Spree is much more known for his Zarya play, while Coolmat is just a better Diva all around. So, I expect that if triple tank, triple support is still the dominant thing in the meta, I wouldn't be surprised if they have Coolmat and Spree playing, because you'll have, Muma in there in your Rhine, you'll have Coolmat on your Diva, you'll have Spree on your Zarya. You put in one of your supports as, Zenyatta or Moira, whoever you want to put them on. You have one on Moira, one on Lucio. I'm sorry for how much I'm, doing whatever. And then you probably have one on obviously you have one on Brigitte. That might be a DPS player, though, so... But if triple tank, triple support is the comp that we start to see still dominate this season of the Overwatch League. I mean, it didn't dominate the last season of the Overwatch League until the end of it, but if it is the comp that dominates it for Season 2, I wouldn't be surprised if we see both Coolmat and Spree play. I think they're both fine players. I think they both performed well, but Spree is definitely the better Zarya. They're both interesting players because they both also are decent Soldier 76 players, but they are flex players, so that's kind of what you'd expect. But like I said, I really expect, if they need a flex tank to be playing Diva, it's going to be Coolmat 99% of the time, and if they need one to play Zarya, I feel like it's going to be Spree 99% of the time. Maybe not as high, because I think I would argue that Coolmat is just better on average. I think Diva's more important, and that might be a big part of why, if they do only have one playing, it's most likely going to be Coolmat, but that's whatever. So those are two positions that I have no worries with this team. I think they're fine. And then you have the supports, which I also don't really have an issue with. I have something I'll talk about when we get to the off supports. Well, I'll start with the main supports because I think that's a little bit more clear cut. You have Bonnie and you have Boink. Boink is a much more known Lucio player than anything else. Bonnie was the guy who played for this team the most last season. I expect him to stay that way. But if they need someone to play Lucio, right? If they're running triple tank, triple support, and they opt to go with no Moira, or they opt to go with Raucus, who is obviously their flex support on Moira, I wouldn't be surprised if they had Boink playing instead of Bonnie. But I'm pretty sure even late in the season they still had Bonnie playing, because Bonnie is the better support player. So I don't expect Boink to ever really play that much. I expect Bonnie to play pretty much every game from start to finish, but you do have Boink. Bonnie has just a wider hero pool. He can play most support heroes. Raucus, on the other hand, is going to be your Zenyatta for the most part. Now, what's interesting about Raucus and Zenyatta's in general, Zenyatta's an interesting hero, due primarily to the fact that Zenyatta is a hero that is just so different between the Western teams and the South Korean teams. South Korean teams play Zenyatta so much better than Western teams do, in my opinion. And someone might say, well, that's the case with most heroes, right? South Korean players are just a lot better. And while in ways you're right, in ways the best player at every hero is, in pretty much every case, a South Korean. Maybe you have a couple exceptions here and there, but you look at someone like Widowmaker, right? Most people, I think, would say Carpe is the best Widowmaker. I would tend to agree if that is what you believed. But Surefour, a Canadian, won the Widowmaker duels at the Overwatch League All-Star game. Obviously, it's not telling fully of what it takes me, a Widowmaker player, but you're looking at that. Linkser has one of the highest duel rates of Widowmaker players, and he's a Western player. He's from Finland. Um, did I say Raucous? I meant Linkser. I don't know who I said. It's Linkser. Whatever I meant. I said Linkser if I didn't say it. Or I meant Linkser if I didn't say it. I'm out of it. But Zenyatta's a hero that, like, the best Zenyatta players, you're saying Jonak, you're saying Badoshin, maybe you say someone else. But, I mean, Boombox is good, but he's not close to how good Jonak is or how good Badoshin are. I think those two are by far the best. And Raucous is in that same boat. Raucous is a good player, but I think there's really only so good that a Western Zenyatta can be, and I think Raucous has done a lot to get to that point, but I don't think he's the best in terms of all-time Zenyatta players. But he's still very good, and this sounds like I'm kind of roasting him and I'm bashing him. I don't want it to come off that way. I think he's a very good player, and I think that he has shown how good of a player he is. He's played for the U.S. World Cup team for 2 straight years. Obviously, they were a bit of a disappointing team this past season, or this past World Cup. But I don't really think you can kind of blame that on one particular person. I think it was multiple reasons why. But Raucous is a good player, and he's the kind of player to watch and look out for with this team in this off support role, because he is their only one. So he is going to be playing that Zenyatta role or whatever flex support role they need of him. And I look at this team, and I really think that this is a very interesting team, because I think this is the story of the Houston Outlaws. And it's as simple as, if their DPS play is improved from last season, they are a playoff team. If they can work out the issues that they had at DPS play at times, with the addition of Dante, if Dante is enough for them, I think this is a team that can make playoffs, because obviously they were 2 games, two more wins than they were in playoffs, right? And maybe Dante can get them to that point, because I think this is a team. This team didn't lose much in terms of talent. They lost Mendo Kusai and Clockwork and Fact Fiction, but they weren't really playing. So you're not like losing starters really. You add a player. You have a team like Boston, who has lost a good amount of players who might not make it. You have a team. Obviously, you don't have to win. It's not divisional late in the game. So you have a team like the LA Gladiators who have lost some players. The LA Valiant have lost some players. Not a lot, some of these teams, but some of these teams that made the playoffs have lost some players. And if the dive meta, which is what the New York Excelsior excelled at, isn't relevant, maybe you have a team like New York that was really good at dive and not really great at anything else, as we saw late in the season. Maybe a team like that collapses, right? Houston's in a very interesting situation, because if they have figured out what their biggest issue is and have perfected that problem, not perfected it, ironed it out, fixed it up, this is a team that I believe could make playoffs, especially with an expanded 8-team playoff. But they need to be playing well. They need to not hit these streaks where they're really good or kind of bad, because they were in that way. They were similar to a team like Philadelphia, who had really high highs and really low lows. Sorry about that. And it's a problem that I think some of these teams have had, and multiple teams have had this issue. It's not super uncommon. It's a thing in professional sports too. But Houston needs to keep themselves composed, and they need DPS play to be as good as possible if they want a shot, because the Atlantic Division's hard, right? And they don't have as many chances against specific teams, right? Last season you had 40 games. Now you only have 28, and most of those, 18 of them are against Atlantic teams, which means they're playing New York twice a year, they're playing London twice, they're playing Philly twice, they're playing Boston twice, which, maybe they win those both times. They play Florida twice, which isn't that bad. They have to play some of these other teams twice, and they're only playing a team like Shanghai once, or Dallas once. So whether or not Houston makes playoffs really comes down to how much they've improved in that DPS play. And it's as simple as that. I think this is a team that has a very good shot at making playoffs. I'll get into my playoff kind of predictions, much later on when we're getting towards the closer to the season. But I think this is a team that I think everyone should look out for. Everyone should keep their eye on, because I think this is a team that might just have what they need to make it the distance. They just have to put in that time and that effort to get that DPS play as high skill and as good as they can. But that is where I end my thoughts on the Houston Outlaws. If you have your own thoughts on the Houston Outlaws, I'm pretty sure there's some Houston Outlaws fans out there. Let me know what you think. It's interesting to hear from people who are more fans of the team, who follow the team much closer than I did. Houston is a team that I did follow somewhat close compared to some of the other teams, so they're a team that I did know kind of what was going on. I watched them as much as I could. So I'm interested to hear, though, from people who are genuinely Houston Outlaws fans and have a lot more opinion on them. But that's where I'm going to end this video off. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you all in the next time. And I hope you all had a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving.